He was drunk. 3,000 years ago, an Egyptian tomb worker failed to show up for work because he was drunk, and someone wrote down the reason. Not implied, not euphemized. A scribe recorded it on a small flake of limestone. A disposable note that was never meant to survive. And that's the strange part. If an ancient Egyptian's hangover was worth recording, what else did they think was worth writing down? What did an ordinary day actually look like? The breakfast, the walk to work, the arguments, the hours underground, and what happened when the sun went down? Somewhere in thousands of scraps of pottery and limestone left behind by ordinary workers, an entire ordinary day is hiding, waiting to be reassembled. Not the pharaohs, not their gods, a Tuesday. For the community we can document most closely. The artisans of a purpose-built village called Deir el-Medina, who spent their lives carving and painting the royal tombs. A typical working day would have begun before the sun cleared the cliffs above the valley, with bread and beer, two staples of the Egyptian diet, eaten before the walk out to the work site. The crew split in two on arrival, a right side and a left side, each working under its own chief workman. It's an oddly modern piece of organization for a Bronze Age job site. 2 teams, 2 supervisors, 1 deadline. The work itself was slow, exhausting, and specialist. Copper chisels against limestone, oil lamps burning in tunnels with almost no ventilation, the air thick with rock dust and lamp smoke. Painters worked in a different rhythm entirely from the men doing the cutting, outlining, then filling, then a final pass by a master's hand. A precision modern conservators still study under magnification. Around midday, when the heat above ground was at its worst, the crews paused to eat and rest before returning to the dark. None of this survives as legend. It survives as ostraca, cheap, disposable flakes of stone and pottery the villagers used the way we'd use a notepad, and which together describe a working life in a level of detail almost no other ancient community left behind. Here's where the stereotype starts to bend. Egyptian time didn't run in 7-day weeks, it ran in 10-day periods. At Deir el-Medina, workers generally followed this 10-day cycle, with several days set aside for rest. Something surprisingly close to a weekend, nearly 3,000 years before the word existed. Pay wasn't coin. It was measured rations of emmer wheat and barley, alongside beer, fish, vegetables, and firewood, tracked by a scribe whose job was making sure nobody was shorted a portion. But what happened when someone simply didn't come in? This is where the ostraca get genuinely strange. One entry records a worker absent because he was, in the scribe's words, embalming his mother. Another cites a scorpion sting. Several read only brewing beer or, more bluntly, drunk. One man stayed home over trouble with his wife, and the scribe felt no need to elaborate, which somehow makes it funnier. There are records of a physician treating the sick, of eye complaints, of a wife giving birth, while her husband took leave to be there, and the evening had its own shape. A meal, likely stew, or bread with vegetables and the day's beer ration. Evenings could include quiet household routines, simple meals, family conversations, and games played before sleep. Boards for Senet, a popular game of chance and strategy, have turned up in the village, evidence of exactly the kind of evening that leaves almost no trace anywhere else in the ancient world. People playing games, talking, and settling down before doing it all again tomorrow. Except one year, the day couldn't absorb what happened next. In the 29th year of the reign of Ramesses III, the grain rations that functioned as the village's wages failed to arrive on time. Not missing, late, which in a ration-based economy could amount to the same thing. The workers walked to the gates of nearby mortuary temples. They went on strike, they stopped, sat down, and refused to move until officials answered for it, more than once, over several months, until partial payment was negotiated. The papyrus describing it, now known as the Turin Strike Papyrus, records what is widely considered one of the earliest documented labor strikes in history. Not a rebellion against tyranny in the abstract, but a dispute over a late paycheck, filed by men who expected, reasonably, to be heard, which makes the old image, silent, faceless slaves under the whip, building monuments to men who'd never know their names, worth asking where it actually came from. Largely from Herodotus, a Greek historian writing well over 1,000 years after the pyramids were finished, repeating stories rather than witnessing anything. Partly from the Book of Exodus, describing a different population under different later circumstances, later flattened by popular culture onto every Egyptian monument regardless of era. At Giza itself, excavations of the workers' town beside the pyramids tell much the same story as Deir el-Medina, 1,000 years earlier. Bakeries capable of feeding thousands, breweries, and evidence of cattle butchered on a scale reserved for well-fed labor, not starving captives, none of which made the day easy. Limestone dust destroyed lungs. Falls and infections killed skilled men in their 30s and 40s. Childbirth was also dangerous, as it was for women in many pre-modern societies. This was not a comfortable life by any modern measure, and nothing here is an argument that it was. What it argues instead is something quieter and more unsettling in its familiarity. A society that organized its labor carefully enough and valued it enough to leave a paper trail when that arrangement broke down, which is really what survives in the end. Not the tombs, the Tuesday, the sick days, the family gossip, the missed wages, the quiet insistence that a promise made in grain should be a promise kept. It's easy to look at the Valley of the Kings and see only power carved into rock to outlast memory. It's harder and far more revealing to look at a broken piece of pottery and see a man explaining to his foreman why he didn't come in yesterday. 3,000 years on, that scrap of limestone still asks the same quiet question every ordinary day they eventually does. Not what were you building, but were you treated fairly while you built it?